Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast, where we serve and support leaders so you can serve and support your local church.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Olson. We have been just in a really cool season so far in 2022 of getting to talk to some incredible people from all over the world. And it excites me because if you've been a podcast listener for a while, you know, you've heard me say it. I absolutely love getting to hear what is going on in the church worldwide because it's a reminder that God is doing something new and wonderful all over. And we get to be a part of that. And I just think that is so exciting. And today I am excited to have a conversation with some people who are joining me from Vancouver, Washington. So Channing, Stockman, and Aaron Olsen are joining me all the way from Washington. They are with a ministry called The Responding, which is birthed out of the church, Crossroads Community Church in Washington. And they're going to share their heart with you today about the ministry, about music, about songwriting, and it's going to be amazing. So Channing, Aaron, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Channing, will you kick us off here and just tell everybody a little bit about you, about the ministry, and where God has you today?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've actually only been here for about a year with Crossroads, but it's been a wild year. Came and got involved during obviously during COVID and all that stuff. But God's just really opened up a lot of doors and some really amazing opportunities. I had previous relationships with some of the guys here, and so as God sort of called me to this ministry and this opportunity, it was just a really fun transition for myself. And so one of the things that kind of has become life's mission over the last year for us, and this is really where we're headed with everything, is really ramping up our songwriting. It's something we've been really focused on for the last year, really just trying to tell good stories and be able to point our church back to the hope of Jesus and be able to hopefully give some clarity and some some joy and some hope in a season that's been really, really challenging for a lot of people. And so that's kind of been a lot of our focus. We also, I'm part of the worship ministry here as well, so I get to lead and be a part of our Sunday ministries and all that stuff, which is always a blast, and we always have a really good time. And then my buddy Aaron here is with us. He's a producer, songwriter, and engineer that he's kind of our one-man extraordinaire, really helps us get through a lot of what we do. And he's been here for a little while as well and been able to be a part of what we do with The Responding for a number of years now. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Aaron, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think why I love and why I got so drawn to this church was but previous to this, I was in a band that toured full-time. So I was always on the road, always gone. And you'd kind of come home to your church, and they'd be like, oh, who are you? And they're meeting you for, like, the first time. I'm like, I've been on here for a couple of years. And so it's just kind of just always a weird experience. And any musicians who tour, they totally know this. Yeah. And it's just part of the struggle. And I had a buddy who was working on an album here at this church. This was 4 or 5 years ago. And so I just came, started to help, and kind of met some of the pastors and left on tour promptly for probably 4 or 5 months. It was a long one. Came back, literally, I show up and one of the pastors goes, hey, you're back from tour. How was it? Wow. Blew my mind. I was just so blessed by the fact that they knew I was gone, and then they knew I returned, and then they knew who I was. And that just kind of allowed me to, I just feel like this place is home. And so it just by default kind of led me into like being a part of the music, the creative arts, and at the time, like, they were dedicating to songwriting and recording our own albums and all that stuff. Well, I've always firmly believed in, I mean, there's always only going to be one Aaron Olson that will will ever exist. There's going to be one Channing Stockman, only one Andrea Olson. And because of that, like, there's going to be special things within my lifetime of me that can be birthed out of me, special songs, since that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, the idea of like, well, why do I need to write songs? But that's why, because it's only going to be me. And this place believes in that. And they continue to believe in it. In our church, you can see them really starting to get excited about the things that are happening within our church, the songs that are being birthed out of it, because it's just coming from our community. And obviously, like, we do believe that it could go out as well. And we have, plans for that, of course. But it kind of starts here, blessing our church out of our stories and creating beauty out of our stories. So,
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that picture that you just painted for us, because, when I've talked with different churches or different worship leaders who are wanting to write songs with their worship teams or with a group of people in their church, there's just always the question of like, well, would we write them even if we're not planning to release them? Like, should we, if this is just for our people, is that good enough? And I always tell them, like, yes, of course. Like, this is your story.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it could be so impactful for the people in your congregation. And, you don't know the person who walked in that day who needed to hear that story, and it was tailored for them because it's from this community. And so I love that you said that there's one of you, and that's the gift that, you can give, is the songs and the gifts that God has put in your heart. And I think that's just an incredible thing. So I'm excited for this conversation and what God is doing through the ministry at your church. So Channing, tell me a little bit about maybe the passion or the vision behind, we've touched on it a little bit, but the vision behind starting to write songs. Because, as I said before we hit record, I have a lot of conversations with people who are wanting to do that. And as we talk about, writing the songs for our communities that are from the stories birthed in our community, what drives that for you guys, and what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, I tell you what, it's sort of continually growing and evolving for us, because we see the results of having done it, and that helps it grow. But as far as getting started, I tell you what, there are unique stories happening all around us constantly, and those stories connect in ways that are, that we can see how they connect to like a global story, perhaps, or to the whole story of redemption and God's plan for us. That if we just take that approach, we sometimes miss the opportunity to speak now and speak to what's happening now in people's lives. And we can get so future focused or so focused on where, the greater story, which is great, and it is about the greater story, but it's also about the smaller stories. It's also about the now stories. And, just as a prime example, we coming out of the season of COVID and trying to figure out how in the world do you even address this at a local, obviously it's too much to take on to take a global pandemic in a song, right? But what could we do to talk about how it's affected us, how it's affected our community, how it's affected me, and being able to speak to that. And we had the opportunity to write a song of ours called Greater Things, and it was just a song that kind of starts by just saying, hey, we get it. Like, I'm with you in this, that it feels like every time you open the door, it's just chaos outside. It feels like every time you turn on the news, it's some other thing, and just recognizing that constant sort of battery has worn us down. And it's hard to have hope, and it's hard to find ourselves being future focused and believing God for his promises sometimes. And I think that's a story for us that needed to be told. And little did we know, we thought it was just a good song, but then we started singing it, and our church just really lit up with it. And they, to the point that it has become it's really become a heart cry for our church in this season, and people connect deeply with it, and that's been really unique. But in that process, it's sort of just concreted the idea that actually, when we tell our stories, we see them connect so organically and naturally to the people that are hearing them, and not that those stories won't connect with another community; they totally can and will. But starting here has also given us the opportunity as artists and as songwriters to really see a song take root. That is another thing that's just been really, really cool. Just to watch a song go like, no, it's got deep roots now within this community because it is their story. It's our story. So telling smaller stories is really important. And understanding that the smallness as far as the scale, because as believers, our scale is creation, right? Like our scale is all of creation, and that's a big scale. And when you think about small in that scale, it may seem small, but in the scale of my life or your life or this year or this moment, these smaller quote unquote stories are actually huge and they need to be told. So that's the why for me. It's the why I think for a lot of us, is that these stories are important, and we want to really honor the work that God's doing in our community as well, by telling those stories. Let that be a testimony.
Wow. I love that. It's so good. So for those of you listening, let that be just an encouragement for you to pay attention to the stories in your community and tell those small stories through song, because it's powerful and impactful, and it could change somebody's life, and I think that's incredible. So Aaron, anything to add to that, just regarding the process or the why behind this process of writing songs in the church?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something recently that I've been really impressed on by the Holy Spirit and I've been learning is just us as creation. God created us to create beauty, and I've never necessarily had those words for it. I've always felt so I've been doing a lot of producing in my life, and I've always had artists will come to me like, I got 3 songs, they're originals. I want to do this last one. I think I want to do a cover. I'm like, well, you could, and that'd be cool. Or we could create something new that no one's ever heard before. So it's always been in me, deep, just like, we could just create something new and that'd be awesome. Yeah. And I never really had the words for it's because I was created to create beauty. And as humans who are living messy lives, it's one of the things, that's kind of one of the phrases around here is life is messy, but Jesus is real. Living messy lives, out of those messes that we get to create beauty because of God's goodness to us. And so, not that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, we do, all the worship songs from all the big artists. We do all those. Right. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But the idea of creating beauty, there's so much satisfaction that comes from that. And not that it's about that, but that's a byproduct of us getting to align with the Lord, align with the Holy Spirit in the way that we have been created and built, and then we get to create beauty out of, kind of the mess of our story, like we've been talking about. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing to get to do that. And so that is always my heart is getting to create that beauty.
Yeah. It makes me think of a conversation I was having with somebody recently who she was just talking about how she has this passion to write songs and she doesn't know why. And, she's like, I don't play an instrument, but I record my melodies in my phone, and I don't know. I had a great conversation with her just to encourage her because, there's always insecurities too in all of us, especially in the creative arts of is this good? Or is this even worth pursuing? But it's like you're saying, God put that desire in her to create and to bring an offering to him in this way. And I think that the first step we need to take is to just start doing it. And sometimes it's not very good. Sometimes we have to write bad songs in order to get to the good ones. But I just think it's amazing how God puts those desires, like you're saying, and those gifts in us to create beauty. And there's something so special and powerful about that. And there you have it. That's the end of part 1 of my conversation with Channing and Aaron from the Responding out of Crossroads Community Church. And I got to tell you, the rest of the conversation is pretty incredible. So make sure you join us next time for the Overflow Worship Podcast for part 2.
You've been listening to the Overflow Worship Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please take a moment and leave us a 5-star rating and a written review, which helps us reach more people. New episodes are released every other Monday. So until next time, thank you for listening.